What was the worst job interview you've had? At an interview for a tech startup, they asked me, if you could be any animal, what would you be? I answered otter because fun, active, work well with their hands and cute as duck. They really debated whether or not to hire me because of that answer because, and I quote, "We only hire predators, never prey," and they weren't sure how to quantify an otter because none of them had ever paid the least bit of attention to any sort of animal documentary or read biology or visited a zoo recently. Got that job sucked hard. Otters are pretty brutal. They will absolutely duck shit up. Was invited for an IT helper position when I was 17. Would help fix computers for people at a shoddy PC fix shop. They asked me what's the first thing you check if a customer calls and says their screen doesn't turn on. I said, well, you gotta check if they have it plugged into a socket. They laughed and said thank you, that will be it. Then led me to the door and gently pushed me out. But that's the right answer. I drove 2 hours for the interview. Got there and the interviewer was off sick and hadn't told anyone about me coming in. Got back in my car and drove the 2 hours home. Withdrew my name from consideration. The interviewer insisted on knowing why I'd left graduate school. Now, I had left graduate school because my advisor died in a car accident and the whole small department was thrown for a loop and no one seemed to know or care what was going to happen to me or my just started research project. The asshole interviewer wouldn't even accept my advisor died suddenly and dug into the gory details until I was almost in tears, even intimating that I must have had feelings for my advisor. Close bracket. I couldn't wait to get out of there, and in my haste to leave I knocked some solutions off a cart, which had no business being in his office BTW. On my way out, I'd never been so humiliated in my life. After that, I was sure I'd never get a job in science. My first interview ever was at DQ, and I accidentally knocked a 90-year-old woman over. So after accidentally slaying your predecessor, how's life been as the new Dairy Queen? The Dairy Clause. 5 interview rounds with the last interview round being with the CEO all for an entry-level customer service job. During the last interview, the CEO said you weren't allowed to get sick, and you weren't allowed to leave at the end of the day until all of the work had been done. So even though the job was 8 to 4, the CEO said customer service reps often stayed until 6 PM or later. She also asked if I would be comfortable secretly reporting to her about what the customer service team is up to. I declined the job offer and the company harassed me with emails asking why and what they did wrong. Really glad I didn't take the job. 5 interviews for entry level? Exclamation mark. Question mark? That's insane. Also, I bet the hours between 4 and 6 were unpaid. Job was for a vibration analysis engineer. I knew how to do the job well. I knew the pay should be around 95k, and they stated 55k in the interview. When I tried to discuss my point, they said, "Don't worry, there's plenty of overtime." They also mentioned, since they weren't involved with many balancings at the moment, I would assist the cleaning crew with a lot of the cleanings. I've never been so uninterested in a job in my life. Vibrations analysis. Cleaning crew. That's a complicated way to say sex toy tester. Not that bad. But I remember Taco Bell asked me what type animal I would be if I could be anything. Like WTF do you want me to say? I would be a fire ant so I could work efficiently with my closest friends. 16-year-old me said an eagle because they're strong and they can fly. Meh. Dunkin' Donuts asked me if you could be any color, what color would you be? I said yellow because it's a warm and happy color. I was told afterwards by a friend that this is supposed to weed out the racists. Maybe I'm missing something, but how does that work? Do they expect some to say duck yellow? They're all assholes or something? I drove an hour to be interviewed for a computer repair tech job at a rental company, and 3/4 of the way through the interview they told me I was perfect for the position. However, they recently removed the position altogether. They then asked if I'd be willing to repair furniture instead until the position opened again. What in the actual duck is that company pretending to be? Exclamation mark. Question mark. An agency sent me for an interview and said the starting salary is $33,000. The interview went fairly well until the interviewer said, "So what sort of salary are you looking for?" So using the info I had from the agency I said, "Well, I think $33,000 is a fair starting point." The interviewer practically threw me out. He started to shout about wasting his time because I expected to be paid a huge salary, and who did I think I was? He was paying $20,000. Salary negotiation is so weird. I once had an interview for an internship. I told them $12/HR was fine with me. They then said, "Well, we pay $10.50 as corporate policy dictates. And it's non-negotiable." Apostrophe. And I'm like, question mark? Question mark? Question mark? Question mark? Question mark? Why did you ask what I wanted to be paid then? Should have just said we pay $10.50/hours. Is that alright? Apostrophe. In a group interview, the interviewer crossed a line through my name on the list he had after I told him what I graduated in. This was within the first 5 minutes of a 40-minute meeting. Man, that sounds really awkward. Was it a group interview, or did you just formally continue? When he said, "I'll give you extra hours if you bring me smokes every day," then put his hand on my leg and said his wife gives him passes to have fun. I also got a speeding ticket on the way to the interview. Was not my month. Would not have been surprised if you got a speeding ticket on the way home. Just not possible to get away from that shit fast enough. An interviewer told me that he worried I would be sexually harassed if I joined his team. Red flag. At least he was honest and you dodged a bullet. This is true. It's just wild because he basically admitted that sexual harassment was a huge problem in that company and that management made no attempt to control it. And further, that the only mechanism of control was to not hire women perceived as attractive. What a world. I interviewed for a project management position. The interviewer describes the job. Basically it was pure research and data entry of potential clients, then cold calling them and documenting the results. The job ad mentioned exactly none of this, but was an average project management job ad. Else I wouldn't have applied in the first place. I asked what exactly was the project management part and got told that could, not would, be down the road. Maybe 2 to 5 years in, but really only maybe. I thanked them for the interview opportunity. We wrapped things up and I politely left. Showed up looking good in my suit with a ton of knowledge on Capital Partners. It turned out I had researched the wrong company named Capital Partners. Could have been worse, dude. At least you didn't get the wrong Four Seasons. Oh, what a night. I went in to apply for an administrative assistant position and the guy kept asking me questions about liking kids and are my passports up to date, etc. I was so confused. Turns out what he really wanted was a nanny for his 2 young kids to travel with him and his wife back to India. I was so pissed he wasted my time. I noped right the duck out of there. If that's what he wanted, that's what he should have put in the job description. I'm sure he would have gotten plenty of qualified individuals to apply. Had a phone interview and the woman kept asking more and more intrusive questions. Kept hinting I'm a total piece of shit who's totally unfit for the job. It was the easiest job description ever, and jumping to conclusions about my life that were completely untrue. For example, I found out that being a freelancer who gets a lot of decently paid work each month is apparently living off my parents. She kept going on and on like that for quite a while before I told her to piss off and hung up. Didn't really need that job too badly, but it was in a different country so the travel aspect was the main reason. Years later I found out it was a stress interview, which apparently is a thing. Fuck those people. I had an interview with the MC back in the day. I don't remember the specifics other than I was really nervous. I had a "we are sorry to inform you" email waiting for me before I finished the 10-minute trip home. I had an interview and they told me the hiring manager was going on vacation for 2 weeks after the interviews were done, so a decision wouldn't be made until then. I took a bus home and had a letter from them in the mailbox telling me I was being rejected. It was the afternoon, So they either mailed the letter before they even interviewed me, or the hiring manager raced to my house after the interview to drop the letter off. I walked in the house and my mom asked how the interview went. I just handed her the letter. I was the only person that ours was able to source for a role, and I still got rejected. Open bracket. I've had an interview where they were looking to replace someone who would retire soon. The issue was they wanted a super specific skill set, but someone young who could stay for many years. The position has been advertised for about 5 years. I wonder if they ever found some 30-year-old with 10 years scientific niche experience. At an interview to be a county street sweeper, guy asks me if I have a girlfriend. Proceeds to rant for 5 minutes how young people don't get married anymore. Then he asks me what I want to avoid at the job. At the time I had no idea how to answer as I'd never been asked that in an interview before. So I ask him to clarify, to which he just repeats the question over and over until he gets super angry that I don't know how to answer that. Then asks me to leave. To this day, biggest WTF interview I've had. Maybe the correct answer would be cars and trees. Apostrophe. Interviewer. Putting candy bars on the table to open the interview. Have a candy bar. Do you want Hershey's or Snickers? Me. Neither. Thanks. I. Go ahead. Pick one. M. I don't want any candy now. Thanks. I. Take one. Hershey's or Snickers? M. Okay. I'll take the Snickers. I. No. I want the Snickers. You take the Hershey's. M. No. Thank you. I was interviewing for a job in Houston and lived in Austin, about 5 hours away. I drove to Houston for the first round of interviews, and they said it went well and wanted to bring me in for a final interview. So I drove there again. It seemed like it went well, and they told me they had one more interview to conduct and would have a decision tomorrow. So the next day came and went. I emailed the manager to ask if any decision had been made. Nothing. Waited a couple more days. Left a voicemail. Nothing. Then a couple days later, I just called the main number for the company and told the receptionist why I was calling. She was like, well, someone just started in that job yesterday. They ghosted me after I drove a total of 10 hours to interview twice. Still salty about that 11 years later. That's ducked up. It's simple courtesy to send a thanks, but no thanks to rejected applicants. An email at the very least. A call would be best. Speaking from experience of being on both sides of the table. Even 11 years later. Sorry dude. I interviewed for what was my dream job. Something that I have a ton of experience in and 2 degrees, including one from literally the most prestigious school in my field. They liked me so much on my first few rounds of interviews that they asked me to fly across the country for the final one. So I go through easily the worst travel day of my life. Arrive for my interview. And the interviewer takes one look at my resume and says, I don't know why you came all the way out here. You aren't qualified for this. Apostrophe. Suffice to say I will never work there. Had an interview. Went well. I was offering the job on the spot and accepted. The hour manager went to get the needed paperwork. Came back 10 minutes later and said I must have forgot that we already filled this position. I'm sorry, but we don't have an opening. I could call you if something opens back up. I said no thank you. It was my best interview. Great rapport with the interviewer. Gave me the job on the spot. It for a transfer to Canada Johnson Control. Came into work the next day to have the offer rescinded. The job was already given to the plant manager's niece, and it had only been posted because of company policy. The story is much longer and complicated afterward, but it was the first of several times I had been promoted, different companies, and then been told, never mind. Apostrophe. Edit. Appreciate the replies and awards. Feel like I won Reddit today. Edit. Wow. Johnson Controls is really not well liked. Realized it was a pyramid scheme halfway through the interview. I was already working, so didn't accept the job. Video chat interview. Red flag #1. The interview was with 10 interviewers. I was told it would be one-on-one. Red flag #2. Towards the end they asked if I had any questions. When I asked, "Do you all enjoy working here?" they all looked at each other nervously for about 20 seconds until someone said, "Sure. I mean, as much as you can enjoy work, I guess. Apostrophe. Nope." I told them I couldn't answer their questions. Farted audibly out of stress and thanked them for their time. I told them I couldn't answer their questions. Farted audibly out of stress and thanked them for their time. I just needed to see this bit on its own. It's a work of art. Had an interview at an office supply store once. Guy told me straight up it was a high pressure sales quota job. Their prices on computers and peripherals were shit and that's what I'd be selling. Dude straight up said it's a lot of work for low pay. Not a lot of people enjoy working there. And he finished off with the fact that he's been there for 18 years. Practically ran out of that interview screaming. Well, can't fault his honesty. If only more interviewers were like that. I had an interview where I did so poorly. The interviewer wrote it up and submitted it to thetdailywolf.com link.com. It's too embarrassing to link to. Plus I would prefer to remain anonymous. It was really just a miscommunication. The interviewer presented a hypothetical problem, and I gave him a perfectly reasonable solution to the problem. But he kept coming up with reasons why he wouldn't accept my solutions. And my answers got more and more ridiculous, until they didn't make any sense at all. I was just hoping he would drop it and move on to the next question. But he actually took my answers seriously and made me look like a complete fool. Anyway, I learned some things from that experience. Damn man, now I wanna see it and judge for myself if he did you dirty. Bit of context, this happened in 2008 and I had just graduated as a massage therapist. Since the economy was in the pits due to the recession, glad this never happened again. Haha. MTs were not exactly in high demand, so employers could be picky. The only reason I was even considered for most of my interviews was because I graduated from an accredited school. A lot of the places I interviewed at would turn me down pretty quickly, since I didn't have either 10+ years experience or the body of a supermodel with a massive rack. I'm 100% serious. BTW. Easily the worst experience was at a chiropractor who did absolutely nothing to hide his contempt for massage therapists. He showed up late, went into his office to check his mail first, and then proceeded to have the interview with me in his waiting room. He knew he could pick any amount he wanted and gave zero ducks about how I felt. When it finally got on the subject of pay, he offered me minimum wage. At the time, your average amount was paid about $20 to $30 an hour, and I was already working a dead-end job at a gas station making $2 more than what he was offering. I brought up how absurdly low his offer was and he balked, saying that I would be paid as if I was working 40 hours a week, so it would even out. He also clarified that I would be expected to clean the office when not seeing a client, so I'd also be an underpaid janitor as well. Fuck that guy. Started as the worst and ended as the best. The beginning started like this. I'm so sorry to have to inform you of this, but we pulled the wrong resume contact information. We didn't mean to call you in for an interview. Before leaving, the interviewer gave me a brief tour of the company grounds because they felt so bad for wasting my time. They introduced me to the department head that I would have been working for if that department was actually hiring. Had a great conversation and the department head was convinced that I would be an asset to them, and they hired me on the spot. Edit. Just wanted to add, since this got way more attention than I thought, that I have been with this company for over 8 years now, and they are an awesome bunch of people. It was a very unlucky/lucky day for me. I applied for an internship at a human rights law office. They gave me questions on the spot to debate with them. Like, should people accused of rape remain anonymous until convicted? And is bribery acceptable if it's for a good cause? It was me versus a panel of 5 senior human rights lawyers for a whole hour, who just ripped me apart from start to finish. Everything I said, they made sound like the dumbest response with their rebuttals. By the end I was a nervous babbling wreck. Did not get the internship, but did appreciate the experience in retrospect. When they got back to me, they told me your resume was fantastic. So we were quite disappointed with how poor your interview was. Burn. to. 1. The recruiter started to fold my CV into a paper plane during the interview. Didn't get the job. 2. Was pawned off unsuspectingly to the CFO of a company 5 minimums into my interview with the CEO. The CFO had no idea what to ask, so he went the tell me your biggest flaws way. I was so dejected that I said you'll have to hire me to find out. Interview ended 5 minimums later. I spent 30 minutes crying at my hubris and stupidity in the parking lot. Got the job. It was my first professional law firm interview. I was so nervous. I had applied for a legal secretary position. The attorney whose name was on the door would be interviewing me, so I was a nervous wreck. When he walked in the room, I stood up, introduced myself and shook his hand. He looked me up and down and said, "Yeah, you'll do." I turned around and walked out without saying another word. It was my first real job interview. It was for a graphic design position in downtown Dallas for a men's grooming product company. I was so nervous, and when I took a drink from a bottle of water I was shaking so much I spilled some on me. Also I was very unprepared, because my portfolio only contained things I made in high school for a graphic design internship I had, and some hand drawings that weren't great. I was about 18 over 19 years old at the time. Needless to say I did not get the job. Please click subscribe if you enjoyed this video.